The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Waiting on Debbie Tomasco again. So, I'd like to welcome everyone to the January 25th meeting of the Debt Affordability Advisory Council. I'll call the meeting to order, and Cindy will then call the roll. Cindy?
All right. Treasurer Falwell.
All right.
You said Mr. Briner. Yes, is virtual, and Dr. Combs, virtual. Secretary Penny,
Here.
virtual. If we need one more member.
Mr. Chianelli is here.
All right, Mr. Cianelli. Are others joining? Thank you, Mr. Cianelli. Well, that's 5. That's a quorum, but I'm missing.
Has anyone else joined us or his name hadn't been called? Okay. Sure, some will. I think Alter Wood's calling you. So, with that, we have our staff members here. Cindy's going to explain a little bit about the meeting procedures.
Those who are not in the room, also attending, is Louis Andrews, Sharon Edmondson, Debbie Tomasco, Chief of Staff Ted Bren, myself, Cindy Aiken, Victoria, IT, sort of. If you are attending this meeting, this is the January 25th meeting of the DAC. We are using both virtual and live meeting. Remote use is by GoToWebinar platform. Our written minutes will be the official record of this meeting today. Please, if you are online virtual, let us know if you have to leave the meeting temporarily and when you come back. Those need to be recorded in the minutes. Please just have one person talking at a time, and if you would, please identify yourself when you're speaking. We'll take our votes by roll call, and I think that's all we need to do.
And without objection, anybody who makes a motion or a second will be considered as yes votes for the record.
Okay.
Is that it?
Yes, sir.
If you'll join us in our Pledge of Allegiance and salute the North Carolina flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of North Carolina and pledge to the Old North State love, loyalty, and faith. Members, we have a conflict of interest statement, and please take a moment to review the agenda. Does anyone present have an actual potential or the appearance of a conflict of interest as to these matters? Has anybody joined us since the roll was called? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes of a year ago, April 24th, 2021.
No, sorry. February 24th.
What did I say?
April.
I said April.
Yes.
Wow. February 24th of 2021. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Move the approval. Penny.
I'll second. Dr. Combs seconds.
Thank you, Dr. Combs. Moving approval. Any further discussion regarding the meeting minutes of February 24th, 2021? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Briner?
Aye.
Mr. Cianelli?
Aye.
Secretary Falwell?
Aye.
Treasurer Falwell?
Treasurer Falwell, Auditor Wood.
Okay. Auditor Wood, hello.
Hi.
Here to vote on the adoption of last year's minutes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
This is Don Pomeroy. Sorry, I had audio problems getting in, but I'm now connected and can see you, and I would vote to approve those, please.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Powell.
Okay.
Okay,
Is that it?
yes, that's somebody else.
Just to confirm that Mr. Bruce and Mr. Hickman have not joined us.
Correct. All right. Meeting minutes are approved. I'd now like to turn our meeting over to Mr. Lewis, who will go over the Affordability Committee study.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Lewis Andrews, Director of State Debt. I'm going to present an overview of the 2022 debt affordability study.
If y'all can mute your phones so that you can hear Lewis. Thank you.
We're going to put the slides up here momentarily. There we go. Okay, advance to the next slide. Okay. The mission of the Debt Affordability Advisory Committee. The committee is legislatively directed to annually advise the governor and the General Assembly of the estimated debt capacity of the general fund for the upcoming 10 years. Annually advise the governor and the General Assembly of the estimated debt capacity of the highway fund and the highway trust fund. Recommend other debt management policies it considers desirable and consistent with the sound management of the state's debt. Study is due annually on February the 1st. Next slide. The Debt Affordability Advisory Committee membership is made up of the State Treasurer, Chair, Secretary of Revenue, State Budget Officer, State Auditor, State Controller, 2 appointees from the Senate, 2 appointees from the House. There are no changes to the committee this year. What is debt affordability? The amount of debt that may be prudently authorized and issued in a given period without negatively affecting the credit position or impairing the budget flexibility of the issuer. The amount of debt that is affordable capacity is limited. Capacity can be measured and compared. We do that with our modeling. Issuance beyond the prescribed level can erode credit ratings. The state measures its available capacity using tax-supported debt. Self-supporting debt is excluded. Examples of self-supporting debt are North Carolina Turnpike Authority revenue bonds and Garvey bonds, which are funded by federal funds. Slide. Outstanding debt by type. GEO bonds are voter-approved bonds which place the full faith and credit of the state. There are approximately 2.6 billion GEO bonds outstanding on June 30th. The last of the highway GEO bonds issued in the early 2000s were retired last year. Tax-supported special indebtedness bonds are non-voter-approved bonds supported by designated appropriation. Examples are limited obligation bonds such as the build-in-C highway bonds and capital leases. Special indebtedness outstanding was approximately 2.3 billion on June 30th. North Carolina Turnpike Authority gap funded appropriation bonds. They're revenue bonds with an appropriation support element designed to fill a revenue gap. The amount outstanding was $750 million on June 30th. Other non-tax supported, including Garvey bonds, energy saving contracts, and North Carolina Turnpike Authority revenue bonds, were approximately $2.9 billion on June 30th. Okay, tax-supported debt by purpose. The pie chart view of the state's outstanding debt by purpose on June 30th shows that, like in past years, higher education makes up the largest portion, approximately 44.2%. The growing area has been in transportation. That's due to the build-in-C bond program. That came in around 29.7%. Small portion there, public schools. The last of the GEO bonds with a public school purpose will reach final maturity in 2025. AAA states. AAA states are those achieving the highest rating from each of the 3 major bond rating agencies. Only 13 states, including NC, currently have that distinction. See our peer group there. The list of AAA states has not changed over the last 2 or 3 years. As a performance measure, we like to compare ourselves with our AAA peers. As you can see in the first 3 categories, debt to personal income, debt per capita and debt as a percent of GDP in North Carolina falls right in the median and better than the median on debt service ratio ranking. For 2021, the general fund ended with a 0.7 debt to personal income ratio, and general fund tax supported debt as a percent of general fund debt revenues at 2.5%. Pension and OPEB liabilities. Pension liabilities were $4.7 billion at June 30th, and that was an improvement of $7.4 billion from 2020. OPEB liabilities were $30.9 billion on June 30th, which represents a small increase from 2020. Funding was for the pension was $2.7 billion and OPEB $3.1 billion for a total of $5.8 billion. Okay, as you can see, that's our peer group comparison chart for pensions, and you can see that North Carolina is doing pretty well among our peer group, particularly in the adjusted net pension liability per capita and adjusted net pension liability as a percent of GDP.
Can everybody hear Lewis okay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
The next chart, the North Carolina comparative OPEB position, we're not doing as well, mostly above the peer group medians in all categories. That hadn't changed in a while. Okay, modeling highlights. At the DAC committee's direction, continue the single tier calculation using 4% of DAC revenues as a governing metric for the general fund debt capacity model. 10-year solution horizon capacity solution looks out over 10 years, year over year, and optimized solution. All outstanding and authorized but unissued debt is included. Bill and C bonds are currently the only bonds with authorized future issuances, as you'll see later. Calculation takes into account retirement of debt. Two series of bonds were retired in fiscal year 2021. One series of bonds were retired in fiscal 22. Two series in 23 and two series in 25. Capital leases are included. Debt-like obligations, including gap funding, availability payments, and DRAM payments. Of course, gap funding is an appropriation support for certain North Carolina Turnpike revenue bonds. Availability payments or compensation payments on P3 agreements, and DRAM payments relate to the I-77 private activity bonds. Self-supporting debt or debt supported by non-tax revenues are excluded. Examples would be Garvey bonds and NC Turnpike revenue bonds. 20 and 25-year maturity structure. Results are presented on year-by-year and an optimized basis. Optimized solution gives the General Assembly a single target over 10 years. Sensitivities provided. A forecast is just a forecast, so we provide sensitivity to adjust for later changes. Connect NC bonds. The Connect NC bonds were authorized by the Connect NC Bond Act of 2015 and were voter approved, authorized $2 billion to fund various state projects. On October 22nd, 2020, the state issued the fourth series of Connect NC bonds in the par amount of $400 million. On June 30th, $1.6 billion of the $2 billion authorized under the Connect Bond Act had been issued. State law 2021-180 40.9, which is the new budget bill, signed into law on November 21, limits the amount of total Connect NC bonds issued to the total amount currently issued, $1.6 billion. The remaining $400 million of authorization will be funded by a budget appropriation to complete the Connect NC project. No future debt service projections for the Connect NC bonds are built into the debt capacity model because there will be no future bonds. NC debt levels are declining. They're are in the future general fund authorized but unissued bonds, no GR special indebtedness. So what you see there on this chart is just outstanding general fund bonds paying down.
Just to clarify, that's excluding transportation debt.
That's right, excludes transportation. Okay, so general fund debt service, 5-year view versus 4% limit on capacity. Green bars represent debt service. Blue caps represent the $100 million contribution to the solvency fund to reduce pension and OPEB liabilities. The red line represents 4% of DAC revenues. The space in between is debt capacity, and you can see there's a good bit of capacity under there. Slide. Okay, general fund capacity model results. First 2 years is over 5.1 billion of general fund capacity. The optimized solution allows approximately 1.416 billion to be issued each and every year over the 10-year DAC horizon. Okay, build-in C. State Law 2018-16 authorized the build-in C Bond Act of 2018, authorized $3 billion for regional and divisional transportation projects. Debt services paid from the Highway Trust Fund, maximum issuance of $300 million per series without special legislation. Issuance subject to issuance constraints. The first series was issued in 2019 for $300 million. Special legislation was passed in 2020 that allowed DOT to issue the second series of building C bonds at a one-time amount of $700 million. Projections currently show that DOT may not be able to issue the full $3 billion of building C bonds and stay under the 6% of debt service as a percent of revenue threshold. If the market continues to favor premium structures, a good portion of the projected shortfall may be funded with bond premium. Here's a chart of the build-in C projections. As you can see, if issuance size is not adjusted downward or revenue receipts do not exceed the current forecast, debt service as a percent of revenue is projected to climb above 6% in 2026. Transportation capacity results. Because transportation debt service as a percent of revenue is projected to reach and exceed the 6% limit in less than 10 years, transportation has no debt capacity at this time. Find general fund and transportation results. General fund debt service to revenue ratios are in steady decline due to falling general fund debt outstanding and over the next 5 years, assuming no new authorizations. Highway debt service revenue ratios are in a steady increase due to the layering in of future building C bond issuances. On a combined basis, general fund plus highway are well below the 4 3/4 maximum limit for debt affordability. It peaks in 2023 at approximately 2.61%. Okay, other measures that the study follows. 10-year payout ratio, we have a target of 55%. We're doing much better than that. 83% of the state's general fund debt will pay off in the next 10 years, well above the 55 target. Debt to personal income. General fund debt to personal income is well below the 2.5% target at a very manageable 0.7%. Percent of GO supported debts currently outstanding is versus total debt is about 54%, but will decline as more built-in C special indebtedness debt is issued over the next few years and older GO bonds continue to reach final maturity. Fund balance and reserves are high. Rating agencies cite this as a credit strength. Almost 12 billion fund balance on June 30th. And as you can see there, the rating agencies chimed in on these areas. In 2021, Fitch Ratings noted that given rapid amortization of outstanding debt. We expect the state's debt levels to remain low even with additional borrowings. And in July report, Moody's stated that North Carolina's commitment to maintaining strong reserve levels supports its high credit quality. Okay, this next slide is an interesting slide. The state's debt composition is changing. It's projected that special indebtedness outstanding will pass GO debt outstanding in 2023. Building C is driving the special indebtedness line higher, and older GO bonds are reaching final maturity each year. This will be a state first when that happens.
Let's stop. Any questions before we go into other recommendations? Proceed.
Okay. General fund, total fund balance, strong growth in the fund balance and reserves over the last 5 years. Fund balance is almost 12 billion at June 30th. Savings reserve almost 2 billion at June 30th. Okay. Other recommendations. State has large unfunded liabilities we saw relating to pensions and post-employment benefits. Bond rating agencies scrutinize the state should not only recognize the magnitude and importance of these liabilities, but fund them with continuing appropriation of $100 billion solvency fund established in 2018. And the new budget legislation, State Law 2021-280 allocates $40 million in fiscal year 22 and $10 million in fiscal year 3 to the solvency. Other recommendations endorsed by the committee, control of debt authorization and management of credit strength and should remain the prerogative of the General Assembly. State aid intercept is opposed. GO debt's preferred but not exclusive. Structural budget balance replenishment of reserves a priority. Reliance on continuing resolutions for budget adoption should be an anomaly. And on that note, this year we have a new budget. One last item, the saving reserve targets are due to be set this week, and once set, we will circulate those to the committee and then incorporate that information into the final DAC study. Thank you for allowing me to bring this presentation to the committee for 2022.
Treasurer, excuse me, sir, I just want to know Mr. Purse has joined us.
Thank you, Director Bruce. You've heard the debt affordability advisory presentation. I'll now turn the meeting over to board members who may have questions or have discussion regarding what you've just heard. And at that point, I'll ask for a motion to adopt the report as presented. And after that, we'll ask board members if they have any other matters they wish to discuss. So, Matt.
Mr. Treasurer?
Yes, sir. Yes.
State Auditor Beth Wood, I have a couple of questions.
You proceed.
So, am I hearing that even though the transportation bar exceeds 6%, as long as the overall borrowing for the state of North Carolina is less than 4.4 3/4, the rating agencies are okay?
I believe I believe that's true. Overall, the rating agencies kind of take an overall view of the state's debt capacity.
So that wasn't necessarily a yes or a no.
Is it yes or no person?
Well, I think since the building C bonds are supported by the Highway Trust Fund, we need to look at those separately. But that's just sort of a metric that we've used in the past years to, show that overall we're under the 4 3/4. But since those debts are supported differently, I think we should look at them separately. And
No, I'm not asking how we look at them. I'm asking how the bond rating agencies look at it.
well,
Because it appears, so is 6% the ceiling for transportation? Yes?
That's right.
Okay,
Yes.
and it looks like it's gonna go above if we keep down the road we're going. Right?
Yes, we're gonna run into capacity limits around 2026 for transportations supported by the Highway Trust Fund.
But it looked like we were gonna allow that to go above the 6%.
The chart just shows if we were to issue the full amount, that's what would happen.
So is that the plan or not the plan? It is the plan. Okay, so that means that we are going to.
Alder Wood, we are in constant consultation with Director Pruse as well as the financial management team at his office as well as the Department of Transportation, figure out the sequence and the cadence of when they issue bonds. The graph you're looking at, you're exactly correct. If the bonds were issued in the exact tranches and as originally anticipated 3 years ago, I guess, your notion is accurate. But we did not issue any in one fiscal year, and the DOT has built the Highway Trust Fund back up to about $800 million, and the reserve balances of the DOT themselves that would mean that they would make a decision not to borrow anything, maybe in a year, in any 1 year or another, and that could bring all that up under the ceiling.
And I guess what I'm trying to get at is if the overall 4 3/4 is what the bond rating agency is interested in scrutinizing and looking at, then it doesn't matter if the DOT goes over. But if they're looking at them separately, I'm not sure I see any recommendations to keep it under 6. And then the other piece of it is under 6, the state's transportation issues just fall further and further and further behind. So just holding down your debt doesn't necessarily solve the problem for transportation. I guess I was just trying to get my arms around what it is that the bond rating agencies are interested in. And if they are interested in the two separate, if they're looking at the two issues separately, and we're going to get ourselves in trouble going over 6%, and the over 6% really want to have transportation issues. I mean, I just think all this needs to be brought clearer to the General Assembly than what it might be if I don't quite understand it.
Sure. Alder Wood, I was just offering that we're more cautious than normal when it comes to, predicting what the rating agencies will say or what they will look at. We've just, as you know, we've tried to present this to them every year, and not every state even does this, and to try to give them some level of comfort that we're trying to operate within the guardrails that we set.
Mr. Treasurer, if you might, I'll make a couple comments related to the auditor's question at the appropriate time.
You have the floor, sir. If the auditor's through, you have the floor.
Yeah, and I apologize for being late. For whatever reason, I had this meeting in my mind for tomorrow afternoon, and I looked at my calendar and said, oh my gosh, I'm late. So I'm the absent-minded professor today. I apologize for that because this is important business that this group is attending to. But Auditor Wood, your questions are right on target. And I think in short, the short answer is this the way we would do debt with general fund and DOT, but our combined debt ratio is what the bond rating company agencies ultimately look at. And so the fact that we're going over this potential internal target of 6% for DOT based on future projections will not have any impact on our bond rating company because as you look at as our total debt as a percentage of personal income, as a percentage of state appropriations and highway and general fund, we're still a very, very low debt state, even compared to our AAA peers. That's number one. Number two, as you know, and we get into more detail with this on our bond rating calls, is they look at other things as far as a bond rating. They look at what your debt levels are. They look at the strength of your economy. They look at your employment growth. They look at how you fund your retirement system. They look at what you have cash on hand in your savings reserve or your unreserved cash balance. And when you look at all of these other things, generally outside of our OPEB liability, we are top of the line compared to other states. And so our complete body of work in North Carolina, because of a lot of people on this call and by good decisions by the governor and the legislature and the treasurer and all of us working together, we are a strong AAA state. And this thing with the DOT that you're bringing up would not have any impact on our overall bond rating because we've got so many other A+ things going for us.
Well, and I appreciate that explanation, Charlie. I read through the other document that was sent with this email, which covered all the things that you just said, and that is all the things that the bond rating agencies look at. So I know there's a multitude of things. I guess what I don't want to happen is for any one item to start throwing us off track, which is leading me to my next question is at what point is the unfunded liability of the OPEB material enough to start throwing, because I keep reading, they're taking this more under scrutiny. They're looking at this more closely. And so at what point, because again, I'm reading that we're recommending $100 million a year, the General Assembly Fund. We got 40 and then it was projected for 10, I think in 2022 or three maybe. But anyway, I guess I'm also wondering how big does that number have to get before it can have a material effect on the bond rating? And we don't need to wait until it hits that number for it to do that.
Dr. Wood, I would add that it's the tale of two cities. Our pension's one of the best in the country, if not the world, and the health plan, as you just pointed out, is one of the more solvent in the country. On a per capita basis a few years ago, it was right behind the state of Illinois, according to Pew Research. So we're well aware of that, and I have quarterly or at least semi-annual conversations with rating agencies. And I think you've heard me say this before. There's a term that many of us are familiar with called II. And really what the rating agencies are looking for is that, A, we acknowledge the problem. That we've heard what they've said about these issues about OPEB. B, that we understand what they're telling us about these issues about OPEB, as you just pointed out. But C, that we're trying to do something about it. And I'm standing on the shoulders of the people at the Treasurer's Office and legislature and Charlie's group. We're doing everything Herculean, close to Herculean, to try to chip away at this over the long term. We just renegotiated our Medicare Advantage, no cost to the taxpayer, zero cost to the member. That's $1 billion savings. We've just renegotiated our PBM contract, $750 million savings over the next 3 years. But there's this big thing out there, and that is the active employees and the rising cost of health care for everyone. So rating agencies know that we're doing everything possible to address this issue. And the governor's budget put in money toward this issue probably 2 or 3 budgets ago. For the first time in state history, we did get a little money allocated this year. And I think if the number's right, the OPEB liability, the last thing I'll say is in 2017, the OPEB liability was only 2.7% funded. That means nearly over 97% unfunded. And right now we're close to 8% funded. So we've been chipping over. We're still 92% unfunded, but we continue to chip away at it, and I share your concerns completely.
Well, I guess I'm just worried. I'm concerned. I just want to know at what number does that get to be material? that it affects our rating, and maybe that's never. As long as we're chipping away at it. Is that what you're telling me?
Right. And I will just add lastly, to be even more granular, it's not rolling off the tip of my tongue, but last year we had a $3.7 billion variance in that number associated with something we have no control over. And that is the municipal tax-free 10-year bond rate that we have to plug into that formulary. And so whatever the Wall Street Journal says on June 30th, every year about what that rate is, we have to plug that into our formulary, and that sets the future discount rate to the present value of all these huge liabilities. So we had a $3 billion change in this liability last year over something we have no control over. As interest rates went down, the liability went up. And but you're exactly right. 85% of this problem is us. So.
Well, no, I wouldn't point that out either. I guess I'm just interested to know at what size does the number have to get? Because I guess I'm looking towards help the General Assembly to get the number down. And so do we wait until it affects us and then everybody gets excited about it, or do we continue to try to push on it in whatever way, whether it's getting healthcare costs down, it's getting funding, whatever it is? I'm just wondering, how big does the number have to get before it affects our rating? And I'm not sure I'm hearing that it will ever get big enough.
I don't know the answer. It's probably what I should have said.
All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't have any answers either for sure, but I do have the experience, as do several of us in this room, of discussing this matter with the bond raters and other matters. And what I do know is the last particular meeting that I was sitting in with them and several members in this room, they consider our balance sheet a tremendous asset. And they look to that as a real indicator of how strong we physically are in the state. And I think that always seems to weigh extremely heavily. And I think they trust us because of the strong balance sheet that we have and the strong fiscal responsibility that we have to manage the issue that you rightly brought up, Auditor Wood. So I just add that as a matter of discussion. I don't claim to have any more insights than anyone else about that particular issue, but I do know that we are looked to with envy by most of our peers throughout the United States. And I just wanted to make sure we don't miss that point as we go through this meeting today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know how to say this any plainer, and that is, I understand our reputation. I understand we do a lot of things well. This is a report to the General Assembly, and I'm asking a simple question about this OPEB liability, and we are trying to control it in many different ways. And if we get help with the General Assembly to either fund it, help us with these healthcare costs, I'm asking a simple question. How big does it have to be for it to be material enough for it to be considered, along with all the great things we got going on? How big does this have to be, and are we communicating that well to the General Assembly? That was my question. This is our report to them. And again, it's not lost on me all the great things we have going for us, and that we are the envy across the United States. My point is, do we wait until this thing gets out of control and it flies back on us, and we can't do anything about it because it's too late?
Auditor Wood, I don't know, as I've said, what the answer to the first question is. How big will it have to be? But I could tell you that we're doing everything humanly and spiritually possible to inform the General Assembly of this topic and have for a number of years. And some of that's manifested through the OPEB committee report that Charlie's chair of the OPEB committee, and I'd like to defer to him to see. I think he has some comments.
Yeah, I see, Auditor Wood, your question is right on target, and let me see if this makes you feel a little bit better. And I'll share this with the committee. I wish I had it. I had it here somewhere, but since I've moved back to my old office, I can't find it. But there's actually a scorecard that each of the bond rating companies use to determine who's AAA, AA plus, and all that stuff. And they're all pretty consistent and standard, but all of the data around our OPEB liability, how your retirement system's funded, a lot of these other aggregate economic pieces of information are loaded into this scorecard. And so our OPEB liability is put in and counts against us on our debt and some other things, but other things that are positive help buffer it. But our OPEB liability is loaded into the scorecard and already taken into consideration when they give our bond rating. So I think that the fact that we're not as strong as we would like to is already filtered into this scorecard. That's number one. Number two is the OPEB liability. What is the old cardinal sin for all of us is when you're in a hole, quit digging, right? With the OPEB liability, we have quit digging by the fact that there's been changes over the last few years to identify the problem, like Dale, the treasurer, said. We've set up a structure to dump money into this OPEB liability, and the fact that our liability is going down some from 2% funded to 8% funded is something that they pay attention to. But more importantly, we've quit digging a hole and making it worse because our legislature made the tough decision a few years ago to say any teacher or state employee who's hired on or after January 1, 2020 no longer gets retiree health care. So as bad as our liability is now, structurally, that healthcare liability, far after most of us are retired and gone, is going to go down structurally because new people that are hired in the state government are not going to get that healthcare coverage paid for anymore. And so that is a calling card with the bond rating company for us, that we're not only just putting more money in, but we're not digging the hole deeper. And so that's sort of the state of where we're at now. I think the fact that we also have dedicated pots of money that go towards this OPEB liability in the future, even though it's not as much as we would like it to do, the fact that we've shown that we're working hard to do that also shows the commitment that we're putting money to it. But the fact that the hole's not getting bigger is really, really, really important to them.
And that's the piece that I needed to hear, Charlie. I'm asking about a number, how big does it have to get? And you're telling me it ain't gonna get any bigger because we stopped digging. So that's what I needed to hear. Thank you. I'm sorry it took this long to get to the answer, but thank you.
That's okay.
Might I make a suggestion related to Auditor Wood's comment? In the report, we talk about OPEB current liability, but I think it would be interesting to show a time series of what the OPEB liability has been and is projected to be, if we have a reliable projection, plus what the funding has been, and it'll show, to your point, that we've stopped digging.
That's a great suggestion. We will incorporate that. I will tell you, when I first started working on this issue in 2007, where I was able as a legislator to get the vesting period changed from 5 years to 20 years for full eligibility for lifetime benefits. We were looking at that time at somewhere between $46 and $54 billion. And so I got that change was when we take the suggestion of the auditor and the latest suggestion, if at all possible, without too much homework, if we can incorporate the changes that have taken place, including the latest one that Charlie just mentioned, I think it'll bring a high level of comfort to the and it'll be a mosaic about the stop digging analogy.
Well, and let me also say, I'm not sure that we need to hold this report up for that. I'm trying to get a level of comfort that our recommendations to the General Assembly don't need to be more aggressive, more, I think, use forceful, but those guys have to, and ladies have to read so much stuff and analyze so much stuff. And so you really kind of have to hit them hard in an executive summary to the things they need to pay attention to. And so the suggestion what put in the report really doesn't change our recommendations. I was worried that our recommendations need to come on a little stronger about funding this, but since Charlie so eloquently pointed out, we stopped digging the hole. I'm not sure, Treasurer Falwell, you need to hold up this report for that.
Okay. Well, we'll kind of take that motion to accept.
So moved.
And then we'll have further discussion in a moment. Do I hear a second? Then we'll go back to discussion.
Second.
I'll
Second.
Thank you.
Is that Mr. Pomeroy?
Is
Second.
that Mr. Pomeroy?
That's Frank Akmus.
Oh, hey, Frank.
Oh,
Thank you. All right, we have a motion second. Now let's have any further discussion on the topic at hand or questions. Okay. Well, I want to say, and as I've said before, that when work product like this is presented to you, it's a standard of the United States in many respects. There's a lot of staff time that went into preparing this. I want to thank Lewis and his predecessors for giving him a recipe to build on every year. Correct?
That's correct.
And all the staff that went to put this meeting together, and to go back to the previous conversation, Director Peruce is the chair of the OPEB committee, and we have these same, even livelier conversations about healthcare trends, life expectancies, discount rates. And so this is not just a one and done topic of conversation for many of us who are on this call. So we have a motion second. Any further, especially those that only get to join us once in a while, Mr. Agmus and Briner and Chinelli and Pomeroy, any thoughts or questions you might have?
No questions, just appreciate all the hard work.
Same here, no questions.
And thank you. And when the report went out, we had a couple of you who responded back and asked questions about page 6.2 and page 10, paragraph 1. And I don't ever want you to think of how we view those emails. The fact that we have engaged board members who are looking at this important matter, looking at this material. If it's a typo or a quantitative error, the fact that you're taking this seriously is actually very encouraging to us. And we always look forward to your advice or feedback, because sometimes we look at things so long that we get cross-eyed about it, and a fresh set of eyes can look at it, pick up on things just like that. So thank you. With that, I want to wish everybody a Happy New Year. And
are you going to ask for a vote?
vote.
yes, we need to take a roll call vote. We have a motion and a second. My mistake. Motion and second being made. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Okay, thank you. This is Cindy to adopt this 2022 DAC report. Motion by Wood, second Akmus. Dr. Combs?
Aye.
Thank you. Secretary Penny?
Aye.
Thank you. Budget Director Peruce?
Enthusiastic aye.
Thank you. Mr. Briner?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Schianelli?
Aye.
Mr. Pomeroy?
Aye.
Thanks. And Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Thank you.
And in honor of having a ratified state budget this year for the first time, I guess maybe since I've been the treasurer, I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Treasurer,
Yes.
while I did say I wasn't sure that the information, I think Mr. Briner suggested to be in the report didn't have to be done this report, I do think it's a good idea moving forward. So I just didn't want to lose that.
So noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Charlie, you're Mr. Budget. You want to make a motion to adjourn?
Move we adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Combs. Motion second being made. Any further discussion regarding adjournment? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Auditor Wood.
Aye.
Secretary Penny.
Aye.
Thanks. Mr. Akins.
Aye.
Mr. Briner.
Aye.
Mr. Chianelli.
Aye.
And Mr. Pomeroy.
Aye.
And Treasurer.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, we're hereby adjourned. Have a great day.
You.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.